Hey guys, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in, coming back and watching. I appreciate it. Hope you're doing well, staying safe, taking care of yourself out there, and hope you're having fun editing some photos as well. If you're new here, I'm Jim. Great to meet you. Thanks for coming by. I make tutorial videos every week here on YouTube showing you how I use different software products to edit my images. I'm always looking for fun, creative, different, just something to do to make your photos look the way you want them to look. So that's what I'm doing today. Today I'm starting with this photo. Let me just show you. Here it is. This is something I shot recently on a road trip to Colorado, and this was along a piece of Route 66 in New Mexico. I've stopped here before. I love old stuff. And what I find is I used to always shoot brackets, HDR, all the time, and I'd come back, compile the brackets, make an HDR, and I was like, yeah. I don't really do that as much anymore. I'm not making HDRs as much, and I find that I'm not even shooting brackets as much. I'm shooting more single exposures. So this was a single exposure, but rusty old cars just kind of beg to be, getting the HDR treatment. So this is a video about how I'm combining HDR and getting the benefits and the pop of Aurora HDR with Luminar in order to get the exact photo that I want at the end. So here's my base photo. That's my final photo after a copious amount of editing. Let me show you how I'm selectively using Aurora to build the photo that I want. I'm gonna hit reset and we're gonna get going. Okay, here we are now. I did a couple of things I don't normally do, and that is I've got a base layer here. The only thing I did on the base layer was crop the photo. There was more stuff on the right-hand side, a little bit more sky. I just cropped it 16:9 and kind of tightened the focal point in on the cars, getting rid of some extraneous area. I shot this at 20 millimeters, so fairly wide. So I did that, and then I went in and started erasing. So I started erasing all those power lines over here. And the second thing that I did that I don't normally do is I actually used a filter on an erased image layer. I went in and added Accent AI at 55, and that's something I don't normally do. Usually when I've done an erased image layer, any other adjustments I'll do on a layer above that. But what I like to do is get a little bit of more balanced light before I go to another app, including Aurora HDR. And so I went ahead and I was like, there's no harm, no foul. It's just the way I've done it. It's not like you have to do it that way. So I just said, I'm just gonna do a little AI enhance. Actually, well, it's 55, so it wasn't a little, but I'm gonna go ahead and just do that on this erased image layer, and that's the only thing I'm gonna do. And then I'm gonna pop over to Aurora. So that's what I do next. So I said, edit, plugins on Aurora HDR. That'll activate the plugin, and then we'll pop over there and do some fun stuff with the HDR component of this video. Okay, here we are in Aurora HDR in all its glory. You can see what the tone mapping is done. There's the before and the after. I mean, it really just kind of makes those cars pop. But that's the only thing I really want to do is make those cars pop. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to play a little bit with the HDR clarity and the HDR smart structure. And I don't really have any rhyme or reason with this, to be honest. I'm looking at the rusty bits of the car and I'm thinking, how can I jack that up? I just gotta crunch it and just kill it and just push those pixels around. That's kind of what HDR is to me. I mean, believe me, I did it for 10 or 12 years and that was like all I did. And I started out, and even now, occasionally I'll do like the over-the-top stuff. There's something that's just fun about it, my friends. I don't care who you are, it's just kind of fun sometimes. So that's what I'm doing, but I don't like it everywhere. It's a little over the top, even for me. But regardless, I think the cars themselves look fantastic. So since I started Luminar and came with a single exposure over here as a plugin, that allows me to hit apply. That'll drop it back into Luminar as a layer on top of my previous layers in that image. Okay, here I am in my layers panel. You can see it has its own Aurora HDR layer. So if I turn that off, that's what the photo looked like before I went over, and that's what it looks like now. So here's how I'm using Aurora HDR in this photo. That is, I want to be very specific about where it applies. As I said already, I want to put it into the cars only. So that's where the brush comes in. So what I'm going to do is go through and brush these HDR edits just into the car. Okay, so I've finished painting that in. There's my mask. I've just kind of done that around the edges and the interiors of the cars, and I'm kind of done. So again, that's how I'm preferring to selectively use HDR in my photos, even though it's a single exposure. So there's the before going to Aurora HDR and after. So you can see invoking that plugin and bringing up all the tone mapping and all that kind of fun that you get out of HDR process really has an impact on things like this. But my sky is preserved and looks good. So I'm really happy with this. I'm going to add new adjustment layer and then wrap this thing up here in Luminar. Okay, here we go. We're on the adjustment layer here in Luminar. So I'm going to start with Smart Contrast, and this is like a 38 or something, I pretty much always start with contrast. I don't know really necessarily why I've gotten into that, but I pretty much start every photo with a little bit of contrast, unless it's like really needs a temperature adjustment. But otherwise, I kind of do that. Accent AI is, or AI accent, I always say it backwards. I'm going pretty high on that one, like a 47. I think that looks good. Again, I'm going for a dramatic look here. So I know you never heard me say that before in a video, but old rusty cars, they're just screaming for this kind of treatment. So AI structure, I'm going to do like a -56, and I'm going to put that into the sky because I definitely want to soften up the sky and leave it kind of smooth and silky. Those New Mexico skies are great. They always just look fantastic. I'm going to hit paint. I'm going to increase my brush size. But I love those clouds. I just want to soften them up a little bit. Even though I selectively masked in the HDR stuff, there was still a fair amount of texture already in those clouds. I just want to smooth it out. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that in. Okay, so there's my mask, something like that. Just kind of a, I don't want to call it a rough brush, but it's not super accurate, but that's okay. But that's across the sky, so there you go. Negative structure hitting the sky and just kind of softening that up. And now I'm going to go into color. The first thing I'm going to do is start on the greens. And so there's a couple of colors here at play, the greens and the yellow, orange, right? So in this case, I'm going to go green, and I'm going to take the saturation down. And what I'm really looking at, I'm going to go like a -31. And what I'm looking at is the grass. You'll notice, maybe you didn't, but I kind of talked about it, and that is when I did the HDR layer, because when you go to Aurora, of course, it's applying it across the whole photo. When I masked it into the cars, I specifically did not want to mask it into the grass because the grass has enough texture and enough crunchiness, and I don't really want to have you focused on that as a viewer. I just want you to look at the cars and how cool they are. So I purposefully did not paint the HDR stuff into the grass, but still, I want to kind of reduce the saturation and the luminance. And I'm going to do a couple of other things later to help that, but I'm pulling down your focus on the green because the green's a dominant color there. And then I'm going to go over here to blue, and I'm going to pop that a little bit with saturation of like 22. The thing is those blues in the sky are really dark, so I'm going to lighten them by pulling the luminance up to about 48 or 50, something like that. So now the sky, especially the blue parts, are brighter, right? So there's the before. Look here, the grass and the sky and the after. I've kind of adjusted those a little bit. Again, just trying to drive the focus on the cars. Now I'm going to pop over to Detail Enhancer. Small is I'm going to go like a 22, 23. And the medium, I'm going to do like a 35, 37, something about like that. I'm also going to pull Sharpen up to about 34. I don't use the Sharpen slider a whole lot, but in this case, again, I'm really crunching up that detail, and I like that look. So now what I got to do is go paint it into the cars. Now remember, I went in that Aurora HDR layer and painted it into the cars. So I actually went back. I left the adjustment layer 1. I went down here to my Aurora HDR layer. I'm going to click on Edit, Mask, and Brush. You can see that's where I want the same stuff to apply on my next layer. So I'm going to say Mask and Copy. Then I'm going to say Done. I'm going to turn my adjustment layer back on and go up there and paste it into the Detail slider on this other adjustment layer. Okay, here we are back, and I'm going to go Mask. I'm going to say Brush, and I'm going to come over here and say Mask and Paste. And there we go. So you are able to do that. I'd actually never really done that before, but I figured it makes sense. You ought to be able to do it. So you can take a mask from a layer and then go apply that on a tool or filter on a different layer. And frankly, it's a smart thing to do, number one, but also I'm just kind of lazy. Although the amount of time that I spent copying and pasting and talking about it, I probably could have just masked it in. But it's a handy thing to know. So keep that in mind. If you have a layer mask, you can go back and get that from that layer, and then on a future layer, in this case, go and apply that mask if you copy it onto a filter. So now if I click on Mask, Brush on this tool, let me show you, I've got that same mask painted into the cars, which is exactly what I wanted because I was cranking up the detail and I don't want it over the entire photo. I'm just trying to, again, draw attention and focus on the cars, and I needed the mask for that. I'd already done it once earlier. I went and got it, painted it, or pasted it here. Boom, done. Okay, golden hour is going to get about a 20 or so, something like that. Just pop in some of those warm tones, which in this case is a lot of the rust. It brings up a little bit in the grass as well. That's okay. The rust, I think, looks really good. I'm going to go get Mystical, and Mystical is getting about a 30. So let me pull that up. This is honestly just because I like Mystical. I just like what it does to photos. It gives that kind of moody look, and I'm all about that. So Mystical's up about 30. Orton's coming up about 20. Looks like about 24. I can't really read my handwriting. But these two in combination, I think, work well. They both give a little bit of contrast, a little bit of, because of the contrast, they give a little bit of pop and color. I mean, you can see the colors are getting more intense, and I'm not changing saturation. But they also create a little bit of shadow, which I like. I used to like HDRs, and this isn't really an HDR. This is HDR just on the cars. But I used to like HDRs to be big, bright, and see every bit of a photo. And to me, that was the novelty, if you will, of an HDR. I don't really like that as much anymore. I like to leave some shadow in the photo and leaves a little bit to the viewer's imagination. So that's how I think about that. So that's why I like Orton and Mystical so much. They add back a little bit of that shadow. And then here's my last little trick. Here's something I had not really thought much about, but I wasn't going to add a vignette because I like the look of the photo, but I do want the grass to be a little bit darker. And so I went in and I was like, well, you know what I could do? I could do a vignette, and I say -50 or so on a vignette. There we go. And the size is like a 25. Okay, something like that. But I don't really care about the vignette in the sky. But I like the inner light. So I'm going to give inner light about a 20. It just kind of, pops a little bit of that visibility in the hood of the car. But again, I don't like the look of the vignette in the sky. So you got masking, and I'm just going to take a gradient mask, and I'm just going to grab the vignette filter and use a gradient mask. And basically, I just created a vignette, but then with the mask, I just applied it on the bottom of the photo. So it's a vignette, which by definition is like darkening the four corners and some of the edges. But in this case, it's only applying that darkening effect on the bottom of the photo because of the gradient mask. So let me show you what the vignette did. If you just look at the bottom half of the photo, there's before and there's after. Darkens up a little bit of those two pieces of grass that are kind of triangular shaped, which is, guess what? Those are the corners. That's where the vignette's being applied. It darkens those up, and the center of the hood on that main automobile is brighter because of inner light. All that stuff is being applied only about halfway up the photo because of the gradient mask. So vignette's a vignette, but you can mask it. So don't hesitate to try that out. And that's my full workflow, my friends. That is the base photo prior to crop and not painting, erasing the power lines. And there it is, current state. And if you do the little sliding thing, I think the HDR on the cars is just a fun trick and a great way to really pop old rusty stuff, which really just screams to be treated like this, in my opinion. So that's my workflow. Hopefully I've given you some tips, tricks, ideas, maybe a little bit of inspiration for your own photos. Go out there and have fun. Before you do, hit that, oh, that looks like a thumbs down. Don't give me a thumbs down. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a like. Give me a comment. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done that yet, and I'll see you really soon, my friends. Have a great day. Take care. I'll see you soon, and adios.